What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode here of Crush Live Call-ins. I am your host, Bart Hanson. It is January 15th, and I realize that we got some football coming on here in a little bit. Excuse me. I am all bundled up here, cold, and I have a horse in my throat, cold in my house, and that's why I'm all bundled up. But if you do want to get in on the show, of course, we do this live stream every single Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. If you want to get in on the show, you can click on the link in the description, and that will get you information on how to submit to be on the show, because you must pre-submit all of your hands. We read them all ahead of time. I read all the CLP subs, give them priority, and Michael G, moderator extraordinaire, who is in the live chat, will send along the best non-sub hands to me. So that's how we do it, and that's how we've been doing it for years and years and years, and it seems to be working pretty well. We have 5 callers, I believe, here today, so we are going to get into it. I don't know if anybody locally saw me in the Boston Globe, but I had a very, very nice spread in the Boston Globe magazine, and the author of that article actually traveled with me to Hustler in September and finally got put out. And it was actually on the front page of the Globe magazine right before goddamn Belichick bounced me off the front page of the online magazine a couple of days ago. But it was a very, very nice layout. Kind of, it's like a parental thing. My parents were super, super excited. So let's get into it here for January 15th, 2024. Can't believe it's 2024. And we're going to go to the first caller here, and this is going to be Mr. Josh C. Hello, you are on first, sir. Oh, by the way, shout out to everybody in the live chat. We like to keep it real and interactive. You are a big part of this live stream. Hello, Josh. How's it going?
Hey Bart, going good. Thanks for having me on.
So Josh contacted me. Now, Josh, so you yourself do a little bit of a poker podcast? Is that right?
Yeah, I do a podcast called Bankroll Burners with one of my friends. We're a couple rec players, so we're not like super big grinders, but we like to think about the game a little more critically, and we discuss a couple hands we played each week and go over them from like a balanced perspective, but then think about like what's actually right from like a live perspective as well.
What's it called again? Bankroll Burners?
Bankroll Burners,
So you
yep.
can look at it in the app, like whatever, on Apple Podcasts, Google Store, all that stuff, and find
Yeah,
it.
mostly Spotify and YouTube we do.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, we'll definitely check it out. So where are you playing this hand out of, sir? Oh, shout out to Jamin Burton, my buddy Jamin, fellow YouTuber in the live chat. So where's this one going to come out of?
This is out of your favorite casino in the world, Encore Boston Harbor.
Actually, you know what's funny about today's show? Everyone always says like, "Oh man, get so many calls from Parks." I think we've got several calls, maybe even 3. And then at the end of the show, Daryl and I, who's actually on the line, Daryl's the guy that called about 6 months ago and complained about how they stopped giving away free drinks, and then suddenly they came back on. Free drinks came back on, and I played at the Boston Harbor Encore this past week on Tuesday, and I didn't realize that they had sort of reshuffled the room around. Like they moved all the tables. I don't know if you saw this, Josh, but it's a different
Oh,
setup now.
oh yeah. I've heard a few people joke that in a couple months we're going to be playing outside because they keep kicking the poker tables further away to make room for more slots.
Awesome. All right, so what size game are you playing out of here?
So just playing 1-3 here.
All right, so
I
one
most
three, and this is it a 500 cap? Is that right?
Yep, 500 cap.
500 cap, 1-3. Of course, I played the 2-5,000 cap. I had a nice little session. I won like about, I don't know, $1,300, and in, I don't know, like 5 hours. The only thing I would complain about is they did have some high hand jackpot promotions going on where they seem to rake a lot, and they're raking a lot anyways. So you got to deal with that. So
Yeah, I
five,
think it's 10 plus 1 when the promos are on.
so 500 max buy-in. Okay, and how deep are you?
We're 350 effective in this hand.
All right, so 350 effective. Okay.
And we're playing 7-handed for this hand. It's 9 max, but a couple people are up and walking.
Okay.
And the pre-flop action starts with UTG opening to 15.
Okay. That's about the standard open in this game to
Yeah,
5x.
almost always 15, unless you've got people just like either bombing it or like min raising.
Okay, so under the gun to 15.
Hero is in the hijack with Queen of Hearts, Queen of Clubs.
Okay,
So I bump it up to 50.
so 3-bet to 50. Okay,
And it folds all the way back around to the opener who calls.
so UTG calls and your head's up, so it's probably right around 100. Not a bad spot.
No, yeah, always. Oh, definitely, definitely happy to be in position heads up with queens.
Okay,
And then the flop comes 8 of diamonds, 7 of diamonds, 6 of clubs.
8 of diamonds, 7 of diamonds, 6 of clubs. So not necessarily the best flop, obviously. It is a 3-bet pot, though. So this is different than like a single raise pot where maybe you open mid to late position and then, the big blind defends and the big blind's defending wide because of the price. It's not as bad as it looks because of the tighter configuration. And of course, we teach that on Crush Live Poker, one of the small stakes exploits is that you actually want to be betting in sort of mid to low stakes live poker, a larger volume of hands or like just a higher frequency than what is quote unquote optimal in given situations. So that's just because people call far too much and they don't attack, boards based upon ranges.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it is a little bit better being a 3-bet pot with an overpair. I will say, I have noticed a lot of these, like, ABC middle-aged guys, like, especially when they see like someone like me who's like young and like wearing like glasses and a sweater, are like, this, they just think I'm so aggressive, and they wind up defending to 3-bets probably more than they might otherwise.
I mean, here's the thing. I remember you submitted this hand. Sometimes I jump ahead of myself. The pot's $100, right? Say you were to say C-bet like $60 and the guy like jammed all in, you've already put in 100. I would have a hard time probably folding an overpair. Now, with that being said, you're probably, it's just like one of these things, especially with that type of setup. I don't know if a guy like that is like opening 8-7s or something like that from up front. It's possible, but I don't even know what's going to happen. I mean, I'm just saying at this stack depth, not the best board, but I might have a hard time like just bet folding like all in off of this type of, stack size.
Yeah, I think if I bet here and got jammed on, I'd probably like side call.
So I assume UTG checks.
Yep, UTG checks, and I decide this time to just check it back. I think the board's just so bad. There are like a lot of ways where the board can get even worse. So I decide to kind of play a little pot control, given that I think I do still have a pretty big disadvantage here compared to what his range might look like. So I decide to just check it back.
And what do you think I think about that, Josh?
I think you'd probably say, there's no harm in sort of making a small bet here. I mean, given it's live low stakes, let's get the value, and if we get jammed on, so be it. We got an overpair.
Well, I was sort of just thinking ahead. You know what I mean? There are certainly situations, but I tend to do this more on monotone boards where you can sort of check back to sort of better reveal, your equity in a certain hand. My only concern here is sometimes you might check it back, you get a one-liner or a 3-flush, and then sometimes you actually get bluffed off of your hand in a given situation. But I would probably be mostly betting here. But okay, it's not criminal that you check it back. So hero checks back.
And I do have that kind of in mind that, once I check back here, I know you've gone over this before. I've heard you say this before, that if we kind of check back here, then the other player might be inclined to bluff or even over bluff on future streets.
Absolutely. If you check this one back or you use really, really small sizing that induces some sort of float, you are going to have to be prepared to call down for sure because you've induced that.
Yeah. So I decide to check here, and the turn comes off. It does bring in a one-liner. It's the 10 of spades.
Yeah, dicey. Okay.
But then villain checks again. So I kind of think I have to start getting some value here, even though, there is a one-liner. I just think that villain's going to be betting almost all the time with a strong hand. He probably won't think I have any nines because I 3-bet. So I just throw out a small bet of $30.
It's interesting because even though I would be betting mostly on the flop, if I check the flop back and then I got this turn card, I kind of want to check a little bit more here on the turn. And that's another reason to bet the flop is to get your value early on. Obviously, if this guy like hit a 10, he probably will, check call. in this particular spot, but I don't know if you're going to necessarily get two streets here on a one-liner. But okay, so you go 30.
Yeah, and definitely a good argument, for making the bet on the flop instead, just to get more
Hmm.
streets. But in this case, Villain does something I really didn't expect. He basically clicks it back. He raises to 70.
That is interesting. So UTT check raises, like a little click back to 70. So obviously, if you call, the pot's going to be 240 and you guys have put in, 120 of your stack. So you're going to leave yourself with about a pot size bet left. It's weird because you wouldn't expect the villain to go for a check raise if he had a 9. And then on the flip side, you would think that if some sort of large combo draw wanted to sort of increase fold equity, that he wouldn't take this kind of small sizing. So it's a confusing little line and you're getting pot odds. So whenever that happens, I think it would be too weak to fold. You can call and see what happens here on the river. I mean, that's kind of how I take it because you go 30 into 100, it's 130, he goes 70, it's like 240 to call. It's a little bit weak, I think, to just fold now. But YG in the live chat says click back, lots of 10s checking to see where he's at. Yeah, but did the 10s, did they check raise here? That's the only thing. Okay, so I assume you call, right?
Yeah, I didn't really consider folding.
Yeah.
I kind of thought exactly like you, like it'd be too weak there to fold, and I think that he would be betting out his 9s a lot, especially because I should check back this card quite a lot.
Sure.
So I do make the call, and yeah, we've got like 230 left going and 240 in the pot going to
Okay.
the river.
Yep.
And the river, I mean, it's not a total brick. It's the 4 of hearts. So it does bring in another one-liner to the 5, but I don't think that's super relevant.
Right, that he would have to check raise a 5 here. And that's way more likely if he had like a 5, like ace 5. I think that starts a bet as opposed to a check raise because it's just going to get checked through so much on the turn. And 5-5 doesn't really need to check raise. People, players don't usually find like hands turns into bluffs. Although it is kind of interesting because you're probably not, like, if you check through ace king on the flop, it's not like you're going to bet the turn with ace king. But so yes, it does bring a one-liner to a 5. I don't know exactly how relevant that is. Okay.
And villain doesn't take that long and then just jams the rest of the stack in.
So for like 230.
Yeah.
And what's the deal with this guy?
Didn't have a good read on him. He had just sat down maybe 20 minutes prior. I think I'd seen him limp a couple hands, and he definitely looked like your typical like ABC, 30, 40 something.
So he's not like he's not like an OMC type.
I wouldn't think he's an OMC, and I wouldn't think he's like kind of super aggressive either.
Boy, this is a very, very strange line. It's definitely a very strange line because, like I said, I don't necessarily expect a 9 to go for a little dink and dunk check raise on the turn when it gets checked through so much. One hand once in a while you find is if someone were to have Jack 9, which is just like the super nuts, is trying to get some money in here. Again, like I go back to, like, you sort of induce this by the check back on the flop. With that being said, see, here's the thing. Because you check back the flop, you're going to get an increased bluffing frequency. You would think, though, that once you call the check raise on the turn, he would think you have something. But the check raise was so small on the turn that I don't know, like, even if you were to like start a bet here with like queen jack on the turn, you turned like a gutter, you might call with that too. I mean, it's kind of close. I mean, you got a gutter to a 9 and 2 overcards and you're getting like 5-1. It's just, I don't play down necessarily like at the smallest level all that much. And what I would look at is like, how often is somebody putting their stack in here? It's a lit. I might do a fair amount of folding. This is of course like Fifth Street Chicken. We call this on Crush Live Poker, which is like calling and making it look like you're going to call down. And then if your opponent, you're sort of basically daring your opponent. You're playing a game of chicken. And then if he jams his entire stack in, one of the things I've noticed is that people are a little bit hesitant to do that. To jam their entire stack in at the end. And but the small check raise, that's really what gets me, is the small check raise here, followed up by the jam, kind of makes me want to fold here. That's my inclination.
Yeah, interesting. I guess I kind of leaned the other way, where I was kind of just thinking this small check raise just makes no sense. Like, I really shouldn't be betting this turn this much. So I would think that with villain's strongest hands, he'd want to start betting the turn. But and so this check raise is like, maybe it's like a 10 to one of the commenters' points. Maybe it's the 10.
Yeah, but why would he
then the
jam
10
all
doesn't
in?
jam here.
Yeah, why did? Yeah, I would be very, very surprised if a 10, were to jam. You have a better hand to call down with than some other like pure bluff catcher that's weaker. Like say you had like pocket fives somehow. I'm not saying that you would have 3-bet this off in this configuration. One thing that gets troublesome with a hand like 5-5 is that once in a while the villain can be button clicking and like you call down here and he's like, good call, you're going to win, and he turns over like ace-7 or ace-6. You know what I'm saying? At least you beat those hands. So against the occasional button click, once in a great while, you beat the occasional button click. I find it very sort of hard to believe that this is a set or 2-pair for this line. So when I'm saying advocating folding, I really am giving him a 9. It's just one of these things where I don't usually see someone put in their entire stack. Like there'd have to be a little bit of history. I think it's pretty close. I mean, I could get on board with a call. I don't think it's absolutely terrible. That was just my first inclination as fold. It sounded to me like you called or what?
Yeah, so I basically decided I kind of forgot what suits my cards were, but I kind of thought, I wonder if villain's ever doing this with diamonds. Maybe I'm going to check my hand, and if I have a diamond, I'll fold, and if I don't, I'll call.
Dean C says 6-5 would be pretty funny. Yeah, which would, of course, is like a pair and a straight drawn turn, and then he hits the river. I don't know. I don't know if diamonds are going to be all that represented here. I would almost, again, I just think that diamonds, when you look at this board and then now it's a one-liner on the turn, I just think diamonds bet out here a lot, especially at this level, like a hand like king jack of diamonds, king queen of diamonds. But okay, so you called, and what's the reveal?
Villain says ace high and turns over ace king offsuit.
Wow. Well, what can we learn from this?
Well, I mean, it's kind of, I think you talk sometimes about the live, like, random aggression factor, where it's like, if we kind of cap our hand by checking back flop, villain's might start turning so many hands that he really shouldn't be into bluffs.
Right. Again, I think this is, yes, you're 100% on. And I think this is definitely akin to other situations where we use ridiculously small sizing that a lot of live players don't see. And then we check back turn. I always give this example. This is a similar setup of betting tiny on a different board texture and then checking back turn. You will have to call down on a lot of rivers with any type of showdown value because the live response to a tiny bet is not a check raise. It's an over reverse float. And they will end up with hands on the river that they kind of shouldn't, like calling like king queen offsuit on like 8-7-3 or something like that, where you use 25% sizing on the flop. And, maybe you have ace high or something like that, and it gets checked back on the turn, and then they bet the river. There's just a lot of hands that they end up with. So this is sort of a similar kind of example. But appreciate you calling it in, and we'll check out that podcast again. What was it called again? Bankroll Burning?
Bankroll Burners. Yeah.
Bankroll Burners. All right, Josh. Thanks a lot for the call. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Bart.
All righty, guys. One down. What do we think of that Bills game here tonight? I cannot believe I was fully expecting the Lions to blow it last night, but that did not happen. They pulled it out. Congratulations, everybody in Detroit. We got a couple of, our PLO coach, Ryan Terp himself, is from Detroit. It's a nice little story. Let's go to, this is a fun one too here. Let's go to our next hand. This is going to be Chad. Hello, Chad. You are up, sir.
Hey, Bart, can you hear me?
Absolutely. Chad, have you called into the show before or not?
No, I haven't called in. This is my first time.
And is this from Boston Harbor Encore as well?
No, this is from Thunder Valley in California.
Yep, Thunder Valley, Sacramento, right?
Yep, correct.
SMF territory. I was going back and forth on Discord with somebody who plays out of Stones. And when I lived in LA, I mean, I took that Burbank to SMF flight like 30 times. I was up in Sacramento a ton. I used to go up there every single month before the Apostle thing. I played at
I literally live like a 2-minute walk to Stones, but I tend to play at Thunder Valley quite a bit. So
yeah, I played on Thunder Valley on Poker Night in America, actually. Shamoth Palihapitiya, when he made quads against me, that was from Thunder Valley. Okay, and what game are you playing here? What size?
1-3. And so it's 100 and 400 is the buy-in.
100 to 400.
And
Okay.
yep, we're eight-handed, but one is up, so we're currently playing seven-handed. Um, and I'm the effective stack at 825. And the villain in the hand has like 840, so he's like maybe 15 or so dollars more than I do.
So I'm just making a real-time adjustment here because some people
Mhm.
said that you were a little bit loud. So repeat the stacks. Repeat the effective stacks again.
Sorry, I'm the effective stack at 825,
Okay. 825.
and the villain has like 840, give or
Okay.
take.
Okay.
Some background. The villain and we kind of opened the table. So we've been playing for, 8, 9 hours together. And this kind of brought up the situation. So we've been chopping like 3 or 4 times throughout the day. And so when it folded to me, I'm in the small blind. When it folded to me, I was getting ready to muck my cards, to grab my blind back. And the big blind all of a sudden said no chop. So
But
I was like, no chop.
but you had been chopping.
Correct. We have been chopping all day, like maybe 3 or 4 times. And then, so I just assumed, I didn't look at my cards. So I just assumed you were going to chop. But he looked at me and said, no chop.
Okay.
So I was like, okay. So, I was just kind of like, it kind of threw me there for a minute. So I didn't look at my cards. I looked back and I have 2 red queens.
Oh boy, here we go. So folded to hero in small blind
Yep.
with 2 red queens. Haven't
Yep.
even looked at your hand, fully expecting to chop, and now he says no chop, and now you look at 2 queens. Okay, well,
Yeah.
I would probably still straight raise, to be honest with you.
I did.
Okay, what'd you
I
do?
did. I was sitting there thinking, I was like, there's no way I'm going to, just limp or fold queens in a, small blind, big blind spot. So I just raised it to 10, which is about what 10 to 12 was kind of what people were raising to at the table. So I went to 10 and then he raised it to 100.
Wow. Okay.
And
To
then he
100.
was like, then he said, just fold, just fold, just fold. I got it, just fold. And I was like, he's not going to really do this with like, because in the few times we've chopped, he showed me he had like 6s and 7s and just threw it away. So
Mhm.
to me, this is kind of like, either aces or kings, but most likely aces.
Well, I mean, if you really think it's always that strong, then you could just fold, right? You're not deep enough to set mine, but I think queens are a little bit. I mean, who's to say that he doesn't have like jacks or tens or ace king here? I mean, I would call and play post.
Yeah, that's what I did. I thought about it. I was like, there could be a chance, he could have jacks or tens, but I was like, all right, I'm just going to call. And if it's a bad flop, I can just fold and, we can go on to the next one.
Right.
But
And then you sort of judge like based upon his sizing and the texture and all that. Okay. So I see you call.
I call correct. And there's actually an above average flop. We got 9, 10, jack, all hearts.
Jack of hearts, 10 of hearts, 9 of hearts on the flop. You've got queens with a queen of hearts.
Correct.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
And so I was like, I wasn't sure, if I should bet or check. So it took me a minute. I kind of sat there and tanked for a little, thinking about, what I should do. And I just decided to check and feeling jammed all in.
For how much?
725-ish.
So 725 into 200.
And so, what the rake probably like 190 something, 194, whatever it was. But I had $200.
So the pot is 925 and it's 725 for you to call, basically.
Yes.
So you're getting not great pot odds. You'd probably need something like 45% equity to call. And here's the thing, like, I'm not 100% sure. I mean, I would think about this, like, obviously at the time about what my equity is here in this, in a given situation. But I could see him possibly doing this with other hands besides pairs. And that would be like ace king, right? With the ace of hearts, maybe ace king with the king of hearts. Now, the best case scenario, if it's not ace king, right, that he has, would be like black aces. Kings would be worse for you, right, because it cuts down on some of your open-ended outs here. So if you were up against black aces here, I mean, you would have, 9 hard outs, another 6 open-ended outs and then maybe 2 outs to a queen, you'd actually probably be a small favorite against black aces. Against black kings, maybe you're flipping, but the problem is that if he has something that's red and higher than you in the form of a pair, that's really where you're getting really, really crushed here. So, I mean, you could just run this through like an equity calculator. Now, if he's got like ace king with the ace of hearts here, you're doing, obviously fine against that because you've got 2 of the queens and you block some of the hearts. You're probably a small favorite against that. So would it be like, black kings, if he's got black kings here? Because the other thing too that I would say is that I don't know if like a guy would just jam kings with the king of hearts or aces with the ace of hearts. That's a huge, huge jam. It almost seems like a protectionist type of bet, like with black aces, or some sort of gigantic draw. So with black kings, you'd have 9 heart outs, and then you would have what? 1 out to the king and then 3. So it'd be like 13, but your queens wouldn't be good. Maybe like a slight dog. I think it's probably pretty close. It's one of these things. Thunder Valley is what? Like is it a match the stack or what?
No, it's not match the stack. Stones is Thunder Valley is just 400. It's the max bind.
Okay. Because I do talk about how when I play capped games, I sometimes will take slightly, not overboard, the worst of it to get more money on the table, although you guys are quite deep anyways, right? And what I mean by that is that like if I lose, I know I'm going to buy back in for the full amount. And if I win, I have more money on the table and that helps me, obviously with my image. The other thing too is that sometimes, again, we're talking about a couple of percentages. Sometimes I know personally that I can take the beat a lot better. Like, if I get it in with a flip and I lose, it's not going to affect me, but it might affect somebody else a lot worse and they might go on towards tilting. This is just kind of a very sort of unique situation that you don't get involved with that much in Hold'em, where you're just not, I mean, it's almost like he's almost betting almost like it's a dry side pot, right? You're almost getting almost 1-to-1. Like you probably need 46 or 47% equity. So either way, it's pretty close. Now, I think what would be more interesting here is what if he had started with like a more standard bet, like you checked and he bet 75 or he bet 125. Would you have like check jammed on him?
Well, I was thinking about that. If I call 125, that's going to, and it's going to put in an awkward stack situation. It's pretty much, I'm just going to have to bet it all in on the turn. Even if it comes like what it comes a deuce, am I just going to check fold? So like I always kind of thought like a few bets like let's say 100, 125, that's going to leave me like $500 give or take, right?
I think for me personally, I would lean towards a call for the reasons that I stated, that the only times that you are absolutely dead here is if he's got, and you're not dead, but you're doing very badly, is if he has aces or kings with a heart in it. And this type of jam doesn't suggest that to me. It suggests one of 2 types of hands: the ace king with the ace of hearts or black aces or black kings. If you sort of run that through, you're probably flipping, and but it's very, very close. So if you wanted to say to me, well, maybe I didn't have another buy-in, or I didn't want to gamble in this particular spot, it's not, I don't think it's a slam dunk either way, to be honest with you.
Well, what happened was I tanked for a little bit, and I was kind of looking at him and talking. Like I was just making talk, like, "Hey, man, we've been chopping, and all of a sudden you do this $100." Just kind of getting a feel of what he had, and he was like, "I'll show you a card," and I was like, "Oh, okay." And he didn't even look. He's like, "Just pick a card," and so I just picked that one, and he just flipped over, and it was the ace of clubs. And so to me, I'm like, if he has,
well, then it's a slam dunk call.
Yeah, if he has an ace of clubs and an ace of hearts, I think you would like look back to make sure you're not turning over the ace of hearts, in my opinion. So I looked at that and I was like, once I saw the ace of clubs, I was just like, well, all right, I call. And of course he had black aces and I bricked out. So it didn't come in, but I was told him, I was like, man, we've been chopping, and then all of a sudden you didn't want to chop. And that just kind of like threw me for a loop that, we've been chopping all day, and all of a sudden he doesn't want to chop.
Well, it's one of these things where it's definitely, I guess you could say like it's in poor form, but it comes around. I mean, it's not a rare type of situation. What I would say is that, yeah, his hand usually leans towards being very, very strong. If all of a sudden he says, I don't chop. By the way, I picked up aces in the big blind this week and we chopped. I hadn't even looked at it. Guy chopped and I turned them. I looked at my hand. It was aces. I giggled about it. Sometimes that puts people on tilt when they pick up aces and then they get, they chop. I just think that the hand itself is kind of interesting. Now, if you had black aces here, I'm pretty sure, I mean, people in the live chat can help me out, but I think you're probably 52-48 off the top of my head. I don't know if you looked at it in an equity calculator. Of course, you got to look at a range of hands, but
yeah, my range was pretty much aces, kings, and ace king with the ace of hearts after the flop. So, I kind of was hoping that he had black aces. I didn't really want to see kings. So once he flipped over the black ace, I was just like, yeah, okay, I'm just going to call. And I'm a rec, so like I said, it doesn't matter. If I lose a buy-in or two, I'm just playing for fun. So, I'm not going to be stressing about it. But just the chopping thing, that reminded me about that since you put that video out a couple weeks ago about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely in poor form, right? It's definitely in poor form. I mean, do they take a modified drop too? Like if you were to fold and then the guy got your small blind, do they also drop a little bit too? They used to do that in Southern California.
I would just get the blind back. So I'd get my $1 back. And then, so it would be, like if they take it, I think if we just check, it'd be like $1 in the pot. I think they take $3 if it's like a limp, so that, the pot would only be $1 if we just went check pre-flop. So I know I think they take $3 and then $6 for like every 20 bucks or something like that, or $6.
Right. But if there's no flop though, did they take any money at all?
No.
Oh, they don't. Okay, that's better. Well, then he gets your $1 because in Southern California they actually take a modified drop anyways. But
yeah,
interesting one. But I hope that didn't like ruin your session. Just walk it off, as I say.
Yeah, I did. I just walked it off and just came back. But I just thought it was kind of, I don't know, poor form that we were chopping, and all of a sudden he just didn't do that. So
yeah, it's definitely Bush, Chad, for sure. But don't let it ruin your day.
I won't. Thanks.
All right, thanks a lot. All right, let's move along here. And I think we have a higher stakes hand here. Wanted to get this guy on since last week. Connor, you're up next. Hello. Connor? Connor F at 4:30. You are up, sir. Hello.
Hey, I'm here, Bart.
How's it going?
I'm doing all right, sir. How are you?
Pretty good, man. What are you playing out of here?
Okay, so the setup is we're playing 2-5 at Hollywood Casino in Columbus, Ohio.
Okay.
It's a 1K max with a 75% match.
Oh, nice. Love that. So if you get into the game and it's been going, you can buy pretty deep.
Yeah, unfortunately, like we were maybe hour and a half into the game, and it just and stacks hadn't gotten crazy yet. But yeah, I'm sitting there with 1250 effective.
Okay. So 2-5 Hollywood, Columbus, 1250 effective. This is a place I've never played. I actually don't know if I've ever played in Columbus. I always think family ties when I think Columbus, Ohio. Okay, so all right. And is it straddle or just regular?
Nope, just a regular old 2-5 hand.
Okay. All right, start us off here.
Okay, so I'm raising under the gun with the same hand. I've got the Queen of Clubs and Queen of Diamonds.
Okay, so hero with Queen of Clubs, Queen of Diamonds from under the gun. Okay.
Yep, so I raised that up. The low jack cold calls.
What'd you make it?
Oh, I'm sorry, I made it 15.
Is that the standard open?
Yep, so far. It's still like pretty early in the game. We're filling each other out, but 15 was pretty standard.
Pretty small open. Okay, so low jack calls. Yep.
And then the cutoff, who will be the main villain in the hand. Pretty solid player. So far, I don't play much at the casino, but it seemed like he was playing pretty solid, pretty aggressive. He squeezes to 60.
So here at a 15 from under the gun, low jack calls, cut off to 60. Okay.
Yep.
Folds back around to you.
So it folds back to me. I've got some calls here sometimes, but I think because of the field caller, I just am almost always 4-betting here.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I would definitely tend to 4-bet more. So obviously if you open and then it's just the cutoff and there's nobody in between, it's probably primarily a call at this stack depth. But with that dead money in between, I definitely lean towards a 4-bet for sure.
Perfect. So I end up going just 180.
So you go to 3x more. So 15 call 60 to 180. Okay.
and that low jack player ends up folding, and the cutoff calls.
Yeah, it's always interesting about the sizing here. I mean, it's not a cold four bet like you're the initial opener. You know, you go to 180 if he calls with the dead money out there. The pot's gonna be like 375, and you know you're gonna have like 1,070, so maybe 3 pot size bets left, something like that. As you do get deeper, you get into this weird scenario where, yes, you can 4-bet more from out of position, but as you get super, super deep, at least from the stuff that we used to do on our top section podcast, we used to do a lot of deep solver work. I'm talking about super deep, like 1,000 big blinds. A lot of times it actually favors a smaller size and to keep the pot a little bit smaller from out of position. I mean, I might go like 200. I don't think it's like criminally small here, but okay. So you go 180 in a call and we're off maybe 200 to 220, maybe 200 to 225. So it looks like that's what I would do. So we're off to about 375 here. Right?
Yep, about 375.
Okay. Yep.
Yep, flop comes down 9, really, really dry. It's 9-3-3. It does have 2 hearts.
All right. So 9 of clubs, 3 of hearts. Oh, excuse me. 9 of hearts, 3 of clubs. I'm going to put 3 of hearts. Okay. And you've got queens, no heart. Okay.
Yep. So this is where it just kind of, and considering this player is solid, it really weirded me out. So I bet 125.
So hero
and the
bet's
cutoff doesn't really
125.
think. Sorry.
No, I'm just saying. So hero bet's 125. Okay.
He doesn't think long, and then he makes it 330.
So just a couple things here about your sizing. Because it's a really, really tight configuration here, I think you are allowed to go definitely larger if we never think that really any 3x or 9-9 is really represented here. Now, maybe he has slivers of 9-9 that might 3-bet call here some of the time, so it's slightly different than like deuce 3-3 or something like that. Now, I know that maybe in the back of your head, though, too, and this is one of the things that sometimes people don't realize is that sometimes, like in live poker, there's no 5-betting range at all. So that can... Yeah, and so if you sort of quote unquote live node lock the fact that he can also have aces and kings here, then that might reflect in the fact that you're not supposed to go all that large. The other sometimes, I mean, obviously you're supposed to be almost c-betting almost every single board in a 4-bet pod, except like the most textured boards. And you can do that with your sizing with just, you know, almost like 100%. And the other thing that sometimes when you don't have aces, this is a very subtle thing, you can sometimes actually win more money by betting a little bit smaller so that you can get the ace highs to peel. Of course, when you have aces, the chances that the other guy has ace high goes down quite a bit. Now, you don't have, obviously, aces here. Now, you go 125, cutoff makes it 330. If you were to call, you would put 630 here in on the flop, and the pot would be just over, I would say, 1,000, and then you're left with about 500. So if you call, you would move to the turn with about a half pot size bet left, right?
Yeah,
right?
and that's kind of, I titled this email when I sent it in like Second Street Chicken. It almost feels like if, you know, when I make the call here, am I going to get my answer on the turn of whether or not he just has me smashed or he's going to get scared?
I mean, that's a very, very, there's a couple things going on here. Number one, you're almost at a point here. I think it's really close where you could just play this as an all in or fold, and it would be quite a nitty fold. And the reason why that is of course, because you're out of position, your opponent can realize his equity a lot. Like if your opponent is somehow like raising here with a heart draw, if he's competent. So if you go 125 and I go 330 with like king, jack of hearts, jack 10 of hearts, something like that, and then you call, I'm taking a card on the turn here with you having a half pot size bet left if you were to just call on a brick, I mean. So if he's competent, he's got to know that, and you sort of allow for a free card to come off. And then sometimes you actually lose the value from a draw that might raise and call because of the pot odds, right? With 2 cards to come. So there's that. And the other thing too is that if you call only, and then like the turn's a brick, like a deuce, you're telling me that you're just going to check fold?
Well,
No, I'm just asking. Is that your plan here?
that was my thought process that whole time, was that if he piles it in, or if I call, he piles it in on the turn. I can't think he has anything else than aces, kings, or nines.
Are you sure he
I just
doesn't
don't
ever
see
do
tens
it
or
with?
jacks do it.
So I was gonna say, are you sure he never does it with jacks or tens here? The other thing that gets tricky here in this spot is like if you were to jam, do jacks and tens that might be just poking out for a protection raise fold to your jam? Because he's gonna get 3-1 coming back over the top if you jam, right? It's gonna be it's gonna be 1,500, 500 for him to call. Although I think I'm a little bit off with the math. Oh, it's right 375, so 660. What do you have about? Maybe you have 600 left. Maybe you have
510.
600 left.
It would leave about 700.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
it would be like 16,
So
1700,
like
600 for him
2/3,
to call.
3/4 spot.
Right. So
Yeah.
I don't know if someone's going to raise fold. These are really tough spots. This is a very, very awkward type of scenario here in a spot like this. It's just one of these things though, man, where it's like you're setting up, you're like, well, I'll call and maybe I'll fold if he jams on a brick. And then so you're kind of hoping that he checks the behind on the turn, but then you just sort of let him get like a free card, unless you think you can make up for like maybe you get value from tens or jacks that would otherwise fold to a 3-bet jam on the flop. You know what I mean? On the river.
This to me felt like a completely like player type specific thing. Like if it was like some like okay kind of shitty wreck, then like they're trying to find out where they're at with tens or jacks. But I'd kind of decided that this guy knew what he was doing and knew how tight my range was with a 4-bet from under the gun.
Could you ever just fold?
That's, in hindsight, I think what I would most rather do.
I mean, I'm trying to think about like how egregious that sounds. But
It sounds disgusting.
But if I was up against a competent player here, could I ever just find a fold? Just knowing again that the whole setup of, well, I'm going to fold to a brick on the turn, so I'm hoping he checks it through so that he sort of, and I'm allowing him to realize my equity. Yeah, I mean, I could see all three options, I guess, kind of viable. When I don't know the player, I'll tell you, if I didn't know the player at all, I probably would call and evaluate. But I still think, God, I would have a hard time if the turn's a brick and then he jams 600 into like 1,000. I mean, I can see how I can see the approach of what you're talking about, like calling and then seeing what he does. But if he's a competent player, it's a hard setup. If it's an unknown, maybe I go down that road of call and then possibly make some crazy fold in the turn. But if he's competent, it's really, really tough. So did you call or what?
I did call.
All right. So Hero calls. So you make the call 660 on the flop. You already had 375 in there. So it looks like it's 1,035. And you guys have, and you probably have about what, 700 left? Something like that? 550? 740 left? Something like that? Yeah, 740.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's a little bit more than I was saying before. So it's actually 3/4. Okay, because I was thinking it was half the pot, but it's actually 3/4. So I actually like your call more because it's you got 3/4 of a pot size bet left. I got ahead of myself for some reason. I did the math wrong. Okay, so you make the call. It's 1,035. Okay.
So the turn is a super brick. It's a 5 of not hearts. It's like a 5 of spades. It doesn't bring in a second flush.
Okay.
Draw.
Yep. And you check, I assume.
Yep. Check it over and snap rip.
Snap rip, huh?
Yeah. And that made me, I kind of made that. I made the decision on the flop that I was planning to fold turn if he jammed.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost really weird to me that he made it as a snap decision. It made me start thinking more ace king of hearts or ace queen of hearts for just a minute.
Yeah, the other thing too, that if I was your opponent, and I think for a good player, because you think about the draws on 9-3-3, like in this configuration that have a bunch of equity against you, right? Like what's the one that has the most equity? What's the draw that has the most equity against you on 9-3-3, 2 hearts? What's the draw?
The draw with most equity. I mean, you're ace king of hearts, right?
Right. Ace king of hearts. So obviously you don't have the heart in your hand. Ace king of hearts, ace queen of hearts, I put into the same sort of category. But if I'm your opponent, like against your sizing there, like I'm doing a lot of calling because if I don't think you're releasing a lot of overpairs and it's a 4-bet pot, say I think your 4-betting range is quite polar, especially with a guy in the middle, which it probably is, right? Yeah, maybe you skew towards value, but then you've got some like whatever ace 5, or some sort of bluffs and stuff like that. When you squarely have ace king of hearts, you beat all the bluffs, right? You've got the nut no pair on this board on 933. And then, you're left with overpairs. So if I'm not getting you off of overpairs, then usually the most efficient play for me with ace king of hearts is to call versus your sizing. Unless I think you could have tens or jacks, or I can put you in a shitty spot with queens. So
That's what I thought through. I would have never played nut hard draw aggressively if I were in his position.
right. So it kind of maybe leans you more towards he has aces here or kings. Even if he's a competent player, most people don't like come out of their shell and try to move people off of overpairs in 4-bet pots. And the fact that you called also really makes it very, very indicative that you have an overpair. Now, with that being said, if you look at the theory of this, I do wonder if you bet 125 with, say, ace king with the ace of hearts and he goes to 330, you're probably supposed to peel. I don't know if you would have. That's a spot where a lot of live players will under peel, like if they had ace king, right, in a 4-bet pot. You know what I'm saying? So I just think you're skewed towards a lot of overpairs, and he doesn't seem to care all that much, coupled with the fact that for him, ace king of hearts and ace queen of hearts is a lot of calling instead of raising. I can definitely get on board with a fold now.
Well, that's what I do.
Okay.
I fold it face up because I'm a donkey. And I didn't get, I never got a full straight answer. We got friendly like over the next couple hours. And I was like joking around with him. I said, I can't believe you didn't 5-bet me with the aces. And he replied to that. He's like, no, I mean, it wasn't aces, and then he just kind of trailed off. It sounded like he had me, but I never get to find out.
You mean like if he played kings that way?
Kings, I mean, if he says it's not aces, he's either a liar or to me it's kings or pocket nines.
And this is another one too, where I often talk about, usually it's from out of position. I sometimes say when you're playing against good competition, you want to take some strong hands and actually call across multiple streets so that you can't just liberally get value bet against. If for some reason I played aces like this and I was your opponent, I'm not sure if I really see the need to raise either. I don't want you to make a hero fold. And if I had respect for you, I would think that you would be, here's the thing, like say I have aces, which like almost like the equivalent of the nuts, right? Because once in a while, like maybe you throw in a 4-bet with 9-9, but I'm never folding, right? So say I just call your 4-bet with aces, I get this texture. With your like SPR, like I can still get the money in. I might want you to try to barrel me off of a hand like tens or jacks. And then if I think that you effectively can value bet if you were to hit like a king or a queen or something like that when you didn't have it, that's why I think I would probably play aces as a call a lot on the flop too. Not even trying to be balanced, but as what I would call with, the ace king of hearts, ace queen of hearts. So it's really hard for me to develop what I would have for a raising range here at the stack depth if I was competent in position in this configuration. But
I felt the same way. I tanked forever against that flop raise because I have 0 hands that do that.
yeah, interesting one. Well, thanks for the call. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks a lot, Bart.
Yep. All righty. Let's move along here. Oh, this is the guy that I was thinking about that I wanted to get in. This is a nice little, I think this is a tough little hand here too. Jay, you're up next. Hello.
Hi, Bart. How are you?
How's it going, Jay? Is this one played out of Boston Harbor Encore?
It is indeed.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, and what game are you playing here?
So it's a Friday night 5-10 game, but no straddle is on, so it's just a pure 5-10.
And is this
in that game you can buy in 200 bigs?
Is this so it's up to 2,000, right? 2K max.
Yeah.
Yeah, for whatever reason, like when I go in there, a lot of times I'll go in, like I went Tuesday this past week, the week of January 8th. So I went on like the 9th. I'll get in there early, 2-5 will be going. Then they'll sort of attempt to start the 5-10, but it never really gets off in the afternoon. And I'm sort of towards the end of my session, I've built a stack. I never really have the the feeling to go over there. Again, I want to play a bunch of 2-5 for content for the site. So I haven't really played a ton of what would be like high stakes. I see 10-20 goes off at Encore, but is this after they did the whole like kind of moving of the poker room too?
Yeah, the poker room move is done. These days, the 510 is getting going around noon each day. We've actually had last couple of weeks some must move games on like Wednesdays and Thursdays, which is a bit rare. But there's been more 510 action of late.
So, okay. So YG in the live chat is saying this caller better have queen queen, and I'm looking over at my notes and we will see what Jeff has. So 510 Boston Harbor Encore 2K Max on a Friday night. Okay.
So I do have queen queen. It's the queen of hearts and the queen of clubs.
Okay.
I'm sitting with around 3,000, and the main villain in this hand covers me.
Okay.
So I open it to 30 in the hijack, and he goes to 90 in the cutoff. A little bit about this villain. He's a very good player. Like, he's a very theoretical player. The guy clearly studies a lot of solvers. He normally buys in for like 100 bigs. So my guess is like he's done most of his work at 100 bigs, but I'm sure he's going to be totally fine at 300.
So he's definitely, you think he's a winning player?
Well, one of the best in the room, in my opinion.
Oh, okay. Oh, so more.
I hope it
so,
doesn't go to his head if he's listening.
Oh, okay. So more than a winning play. It was funny, just as a little aside, I said on the podcast this week when I was covering 2-5 hands that ever since COVID, there was a very large, substantial, from what I heard, of course I didn't live here, Euro sort of presence at Boston Harbor Encore before COVID. But then they dragged their feet so long in like reopening, there really aren't really any Euros there anymore. But what they've been replaced by are these kind of MIT grad school geeky kids a lot of times. I don't know if they filter up to the 510 game, but I see that profile a lot at 2-5.
He fits that description.
Oh, okay. And when I say MIT, it's usually like anybody who's in grad school or college or something like that. Okay. So here at a 30, straight 510 from the hijack, cut off to 90, gets folded back to you.
Yep. And I'm going to 4-bet queen sometimes here. I choose to do it this time, and I go to 340.
Okay.
So a little under 4x.
Now, I assume if this is a slightly tighter configuration, like under the gun 1, or even you open under the gun and cut off 3 bets, you'd probably be doing more calling here than just 4-betting.
I'm kind of half and half 4-betting queens in this particular configuration against this particular opponent. But yeah, for earlier, I'm almost certainly flatting the 3-bet with queens.
And you said you went up to 340?
340, yeah.
340, okay. So that's pretty big, right, for a 4-bet. And you guys are, you're 300 bigs deep. So, I mean, I like the larger sizing here. I can definitely get on board with it. I think it's fine. I think it's fine. So you go to 340, okay.
And he calls, and we're heads up.
And obviously, when you go this large, as opposed to like sometimes when you like cold 4-bet to like 2.1x, like out of the small blind, one of the things about hand reading that people lose out, if you go really small, right, the guy's going to have more hands he's going to 3-bet call with, right? But here, when you go this large, he absolutely starts to lop off some hands that he's not going to defend to your sizing with, right?
Yeah, and I think the other question here is, and it'll become relevant later, is what does he 5-bet me with? Because remember, we're 300 bigs deep. If he calls, the SPR is still 4.
Right.
So he's going to have some 5-bets too.
Right.
He's going to be folding some stuff, but he's going to have some 5-bets.
Right, and that of course is different than the last live caller that we took when people play more of a restricted type of format where you might not have 5-bets because it's just easy to get the money in, right? So okay, we're off to the flop.
Yeah. So he calls. There's 695 in there.
Okay.
I have queen of clubs, queen of hearts, and the flop comes 8 of hearts, 3 of diamonds, 3 of hearts.
8 of hearts, 3 of diamonds, 3 of hearts. Wow, similar to the last call. So 695, 8 of hearts, 3 of diamonds, 3 of hearts. So front door hearts, you have the queens with the queen of hearts, okay?
Yep, and about SPR of about 4 because we got about 2,700 left in front of us.
Okay.
Now, here's where I think I might have messed up a little bit. In 4-bet pots, sometimes I just kind of close my eyes and bet a quarter pot. And I think that this deep, I probably should be betting a little bit larger than a quarter pot, but I did that. I bet 170. and he calls.
So hero bets 170, and the cutoff calls. It's just funny that we've had sort of similar calls here on this particular live stream. Again, I'll say it again. Obviously, you're supposed to be c-betting mostly in 4-bet pots, and you can do it with almost range when you take this type of sizing. It is interesting, though, about this, though, because your 4-bet is so large, I don't know if he 3-bet calls here, even with 8-8. Do you think he does for 280 more pre?
I think he's going to be 3-betting 8-8 sometimes,
Okay.
probably, rarely. But when he does 3-bet it, I do think he's going to call the 4-bet.
To 340?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, well, that's interesting. So if you think he has 8, because I was thinking that you sized it up quite a bit, where maybe that portion of 8-8 comes off, and then he really shouldn't have any 3x, and it sort of goes down to, well, how often does he have aces and kings? But if you think he has a 5-bet range with those hands because you're sort of deep, then you actually have somewhat of a strong hand. But if you think he has 8-8, now does that mean if he has 8, what about ace-3 suited then? If he 3-bets that, would he call that to a 4-bet?
I think he probably folds the ace-3 suited to the 4-bet. I think he's calling with 8s more often than he's 3-betting it, but I think when he 3-bets it, he is often calling the 4-bet. And I think aces and kings are 5-betting sometimes and calling my 4-bet sometimes from this guy.
Right. And kings is more of a call, right? If you're going to 5-bet sometimes aces and kings, you want to do it with aces.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, you're going 170 into like right around 700. There isn't a ton here that he's folding to this sizing. I mean, maybe he's got some suited broadways that just doesn't have a backdoor that has to fold out, like, queen jack of clubs or something like that, right?
Yeah, I think he's folding, like if he happens to have a hand like I don't know, king queen of spades,
right?
Like that kind of thing. But I think he's continuing quite liberally, as he should. He's in position. We're still pretty deep, and my bet size is pretty small.
So 170 in a call, and it looks like the pot is 1,035, right?
Yep.
Okay.
And now it gets interesting. So the turn's the jack of spades.
Okay.
Now, immediately I'm kind of going in my head here and I'm saying, okay, what are the hands that I'm going to have here? What hands do I want to be checking with? What hands do I want to be betting with? I think queens could go either way. Curious on your thoughts and what queens with a heart should do. I do think I'm going to be betting my aces almost all the time. Kings is going to be kind of a mix, and I think queens is a bit of a mix. I decided to check with this combo of queens. Not sure about it. I could see it going either way.
Well, I would say, and I'm not the best with this stuff off the top of my head, but what would make sense to me if you really want to go down the combo route is that if you entirely unblocked the front and the back door with your suit of queens, so say, example, you had queen of spades, queen of clubs, you would want to do more betting here on the turn because there is more of a chance that, very subtle, that he could have like queen jack of those suits on the front door or on the back door side that are, obviously you're going to peel, right? But obviously that's just two combos. It's very, very subtle. On the front door side, because you have the queen of hearts, you can't have like queen jack of hearts here, something like that. Jack is one of those hands that he could have, even though there's now only 3 combos here. I have no problem with the check. I don't think it's, checking on a 10 or a jack, I think is probably fine. And I probably would have continued to bet on other cards, I would say. Obviously not the front door heart, but so that's how I would sort of approach it.
Yeah, the other thing I was thinking about is having the queen of hearts means I block some of his natural bluffs like here, right? So, maybe not having the heart, if I were to check, then he's more, he can have a hand like ace queen of hearts, king queen of hearts, which would be likely bluffing candidates for him. So I could see it going either way. I decided to check, and he bet pretty small. He bet 325.
Okay,
around,
so cutoff bets 325.
And I'm not going anywhere.
Right, of course. So hero calls. And then, so now we put in 650, so it's 1635. 1635 to the river, and you guys have put
1685.
1685, excuse me. 1685 to the river, and you guys have put in 500, about 8 850. So you've got about 2250 left. So if the river's a brick, I assume you're going to check. And then if it just goes check, you're fine with it. You'll take the pot.
Yep. Yeah, we have about 2150 left in stack.
Okay.
Or I have about 2150 left, and he covers me.
Okay.
And yeah, my plan is to check the river, pretty much regardless of what it is. And it's the 8 of diamonds, so
Wow. So double pairs.
Yeah, double pairs.
Yep.
Now there's 2 diamonds and 2 hearts. Front drawer flush misses.
Now, what do you think that? So what is the fact that I'm just asking out loud here? What do you think? How does this affect this hand when the board gets double paired? What do you think?
I think it's pretty hard for him to have an 8. The reason I think it's pretty hard for him to have an 8 is I don't think he's going to be incentivized to bet, an 8x hand. He's not going to have many 8x hands, and if he does, I don't think he's going to really want to bet them on the turn.
Sure.
Right? I think when the jack comes, I think he's just going to check that back.
Right, right. And I wasn't even talking necessarily about the 8x hands. I'm kind of thinking about, like, now that the board double pairs, is there a certain class of hands that he might have thought that he needed to bluff with at the end if this was like a brick that maybe he doesn't now?
Yeah, I mean, the question is, like, does he still always want to bluff? What this really comes down to is what kinds of ace highs is he going
Right.
to turn into a bluff, right?
Right.
And I think the answer is, if he turns them all into a bluff, I have a pretty clear call. If he's not turning any of them into a bluff, I have a pretty clear fold.
And of course, the point of this is that now that he chops with other ace highs, he might not bluff as many or need to bluff as many as if the river was like a deuce, right?
Potentially. The other thing I think the 8 does is I do think he does have some 8-8 in range, and obviously that chops those, what I think are very restricted
Sure.
combos, because he's very rarely taking this line with them, but he will sometimes. It cuts them by a factor of 2/3.
Right. I mean, there's only one combo of quads. You know what I mean? And he's
Right.
not going to have a single paired. You can sort of go down the road. Like, does he have 7-8? Does he bet that off for protection on the turn? If he ever has 7-8 suited, something like that. Of course, it makes it all partials all the way down the line. And now when the 8 comes combinatorically, it makes it even less likely, right?
Exactly. And,
Yeah.
and so I check, and he thinks for a while, and he jams.
So here.
So the overbet jam for 2160.
2160. So what kind of bluffs would this be? Now, again, sort of going along with the theme of this whole sort of live stream here, because of, obviously, you got 2 things going on. You made it large, number one, so it's a tighter configuration for a 4-bet. We already talked about that he would be lopping off some hands, but you bet really small on the flop. So he is going to arrive with a larger volume of hands here on the river because you bet, you didn't take like 2/3 sizing. So there's that. But, he's not always 3-bet calling. Like, you didn't go 2.2x pre. I mean, you went over almost 4x pre. So what are the types of hands that he would need to turn into a bluff if he was structuring correctly here? Would be, those Broadway front door hearts or backdoor diamond types of hands that don't contain a jack in it, right? Like a king, queen of diamonds, well, you can't have king, queen of hearts because you have the queen of hearts in your hand.
And that's going to be, and I think that's actually pretty relevant. The queen of hearts
Right.
does change quite a bit.
Right. So, I mean, if you are unblocking a lot of the hands that might want, or if you're blocking some of the hands that feel like they need to bluff here, taking this whole total sort of line, then that's probably not great for you to call. I'm not saying it's not a call, but it's worse for you, right?
Yeah, this is my worst combo. Like, queens with a heart is my worst combo of queens, because I block ace queen of hearts and I block king queen of hearts.
Right. Well, 2 red queens would be your pure worst, I would say, slightly.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, if you divide between queens with a heart and the ones with
Oh, sure, for sure. Absolutely. So he goes 2160 here. So the pot is going to be 3,800, and it's like 2,100 for you to call, right? So you're getting under 2-1. You probably need somewhere in the mid 30%, 35% of the time, something like that. I mean, we know he's not just doing this with a jack, I don't think, right? If you ran into a jack, he doesn't need to do this, right? Like, especially if you peel some ace highs on the turn.
I think his value range is pretty much jack, ace ace, king king. Does he do it with queen queen? Maybe not. And then a sliver of 8-8.
Do you
And then
think
I
he
think
does
the
it with king?
bluffs are like,
Do you think he does
hmm?
it with king king?
I think so, and he's a good player. Like I think he finds the jam there because the honest truth is I'm not checking aces very often on the turn.
Right,
When
it comes
I'm
down to
when
that.
I'm
Right.
checking the turn, like I think like I don't have aces very often at all when I check the turn, and I'm not four betting jacks all that often. I'll four bet jacks occasionally.
Right.
I might four bet ace three suited occasionally, very occasionally. But I
Mhm.
think kings is a hand that he would find a jam with.
Well, if you look at this from an MDF perspective, of course, he is risking over the size of the pot by what, 25% or something like that, which means that he's got to be right, what, like 55% of the time. You flip that around, and that means that you need to, what, defend with maybe 45% of the hands that you arrive here with, if you wanted to look at like through the entire hand, which is a 4-bet pre, and then also a call on the turn, even though you bet small. Remember, like if you just had a pure bluff, you're not always calling the turn to a pure. So it's what you arrive here with, right, at the end.
Exactly. And what I finally kind of thought about was I was like, well, against this guy, I'm going to be four betting a hand like ace jack suited and king jack suited occasionally.
Mm-hmm.
I would bet the flop. I would check call the turn. And on the river, if you look at a hand like ace jack suited, right, it blocks 2/3 of the combos of pocket jacks
And
it blocks
aces.
half the combos of aces,
Yep.
and it only blocks 1/4 of the combos of ace king. King jack suited is similar.
Absolutely,
So, like,
ace jack is a much easier call than what you have here.
and because
Absolutely.
I do think I do throw in the four bets sometimes, not always, but sometimes with ace jack suited, king jack suited, and play identically. Like queens kind of falls a little bit lower, especially queens of the heart fell a little bit lower in my range, at least in my opinion.
Okay, so you found the fold.
So I did a little randomize. I decided I was going to call a quarter of the time, and I ended up randomizing a fold. So I did fold.
How did you
and,
randomize, just out of curiosity?
I use red chips and green chips on the river. Green means go. So I picked, I put one red chip in my hand and one green chip and 3 red chips, mixed them up and picked one, and I picked a red chip.
Interesting. How often do you do that in play?
Only on the river. But I'll do it sometimes.
So going back, so it was when I was doing commentary for Hustler Casino Live when Doug Polk was on there like a year ago. He got bluffed in that hand by that. He had aces, and this guy, like this Asian whale, like pulled this check raise bluff against him, and he wanted to call 25% of the time too. And the way that he wanted to randomize that was he had to pick the correct order of his aces, like the correct order of his aces to get to 25%, something like that. How would you do that with 2 cards? But he was trying to randomize like that too, and he was out right away when he first picked the first card, and he folded, and he was wrong. The guy got bluffed off. But okay, so hero folds. Yeah, I obviously I think your thought process is sound. I think that the only thing I like your check on the turn. I would be doing a lot of checking here. I would try to let him bluff after you used kind of small sizing. I mean, I think really the only question here, besides the river play, is whether or not you should go larger here on the flop. But I think it's definitely pretty close, and you're not giving up a whole lot. Did you get a reveal?
I never get a reveal. So I maybe after this he'll tell me. But
okay, you think he's listening?
It's possible, but at this point I do not know what he had.
Yeah, and Twiddlebit said, of course. I don't know why I couldn't think of this. He had to pick the right suit of his ace 2 times in a row. That's how Polk randomized it. That makes sense, right? So, but you did it with a little chips. Yeah, that's a tough one, man. That is definitely a tough one. And obviously, it's tough to play against a good player from out of position. Is there any, I don't know how often you play in this game. I'll just throw a last question out there to you. Is there any merit for taking a spot like this when it's close and playing a more passive route where you are taking, instead of entirely randomizing what you like, how often you would 4-bet, say queen, hijack versus cutoff, you actually take into account the opponent's strength and you take somewhat of a more passive route against a good player because of your positional disadvantage. I'm just throwing that out there at you.
Against this guy, I just want to be as close to by the book as I can be. I don't know the book as well as I should. I don't think any of us do, but like I just want to try to play as close to what I think are the right ranges as possible. And and sometimes that means I'm going to be playing in a huge pot with him in a spot where I'm in the blender. But I guess I just got to live with it.
Right. But again, though, as I said in a previous call, sometimes it goes back to like if you're super deep. Now, this is 300 big blinds, but there is a theoretical approach of keeping the pot small from out of position when you start to get like really, really exponentially deep. I mean, you probably wouldn't apply here until you're like, $8,000 deep or something like that. And obviously, I think 4-betting preflop is fine. But that's a tough one, and I appreciate the call. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
All right.
Bye, Bart.
All right. So we did 4 calls here. Well, everything's got queens. And then we're going to finally wrap it up here with a non-hand call. We're going to discuss Boston Harbor Encore and some of the changes that they have made with Mr. Daryl. Hello, Daryl.
Hey, Bart, how you doing today?
How's it going? Just to give you guys a little bit of background, and I'm sure we'll put a link to it in the description when this one goes up on YouTube. Daryl and I had a conversation, right after the World Series, maybe this past summer? Yeah, right after the World Series, as if I remember it. And this was back when, for whatever reason, Boston Harbor Encore decided that it would be in their best interest to take away free drinks at the poker room. This was after charging whatever it is, 10% up to $10 in rake. And that did not go over well in the room, Daryl. And very shortly after we had that conversation, they actually brought free drinks back, right?
They did.
Yeah.
I heard from a floor or two that they might have heard our conversation on here. So
yeah, and I for some reason the guy's name escapes me, but the guy that used to be the head of the room during right before COVID, and then he went out and he opened Resorts World's poker room. People know who I'm talking about if you're familiar with that. He actually contacted me. I wanted to see if he wanted to come on the show, but he didn't. And he was just like, yeah, it's a different setup there now. Before I moved on, we had some, people that had some influence in the poker department, and the higher ups would listen to me. This is that guy. And he had some influence like at corporate. And then when he sort of moved on, the people that run poker now don't have much influence at all. And he just wanted to point out that, these decisions aren't necessarily made. I mean, sometimes the people in poker might think that they're bad decisions too, but they just don't have a say in it. And that drink thing was really like somebody who knew nothing about poker just looking at probably the balance sheet and being like, well, how much can we cut here to get profit? And really not taking into account how it would adversely affect the room. But of course, you're calling about something different, because when I went in there this past Tuesday, the room was kind of changed around a little bit.
yeah, so they've completely redone the setup. They've put slot machines in the center of the second floor where the poker tables used to be, and have moved the poker tables into a room that used to be like a conference room where you went to pick up free gifts and items and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also a small area of poker tables next to the bathrooms on the second floor near the north elevator.
Mm-hmm.
So there's about 7 tables there.
Yeah.
And the new setup is noisier and more disruptive than even the center of the room tables were.
Okay.
Not only is it distracting for players and hard to concentrate, especially when you're really close to the door. And I mean, the room next to the bathroom is, you can't hear anything in there. But, I've heard floors complain, that they're having a hard time on the microphones and the walkie-talkies, being able to hear instructions coming from, their command post. I know I've missed out on tables because I can't even hear over the intercom, if I've been called, and I might miss the text message on Poker Atlas. So that's been really tough.
Because the podium was set up for the intercom to be in the other area, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be very, very frustrating, because the setup I didn't really catch this because, like I said, I played at, Tuesday at 10 in the morning, so the room wasn't anywhere near full. But I will say that there's still a limited number of tables, and when it gets busy, you can be waiting for hours. So it would be really fucking annoying if you couldn't hear your name get called and it somehow got passed over, right?
Absolutely. Or let's say you're waiting at 1-3 and you want to get into a good 2-5 or 5-10 and you miss the same thing and you miss it. It's very, very frustrating. Um, and then on top of the noise complaint, I mean, the TVs are really small. You can barely see. You're straining your eyes to watch a football game.
Hmm.
And there's people who want a sports bet or who might have a lot of action, who are just coming to play poker and pass the time, and they might not want to sit in an environment like that. And I would say just the environment itself. The comment about the playing outside that somebody earlier made is really how it feels. How far are they going to squeeze us until they say they're moving across the street, but how far are they going to squeeze us over here while we're paying $10, up to 10% up to $10, and while people are paying $13 every half an hour.
I mean, listen, and it's even more pronounced now as more rooms have opened, or maybe these rooms were open the last time we talked, Daryl, but it seems like they've sort of picked up a little bit. I'm talking about the New Hampshire rooms because you got Twin River too. So if you live on the South Shore, Twin River is sort of back, and now they're taking in call-ins out of Providence, and then you got MGM Springfield. But if you live north, you can always drive to New Hampshire. You got to vote with your feet. I mean, there's really, and it's unfortunate, I will say now, that this is not something where they can probably revert back, right? I mean, I saw those slot machines took over. It's not like, I don't know, maybe it is easy for them to move them. I would just think that this is more of a permanent move now.
The thing, this move is definitely permanent, but you can do something simple like put glass doors where the openings are. I mean, something as simple as that could absolutely muffle the sound and still have a welcoming room where you can see inside. And it would, and I know that there have been some 5-10 and 10-25 players who have, been able to make their voice heard to some higher ups.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've heard is, some of the poker people are receptive to some of these changes, but how quickly these things happen, it's really hard to say.
So you think that they should do something about the noise? That's your main complaint. Now, obviously when besides them really, really kind of raking you over the coals with the rake, coming back and just being at so much higher before, they still haven't really solved the whole chip and cash out situation over there either, right?
Yeah, so that's another huge issue.
Now that would just drive me nuts if I was there on a weekend night.
I mean, and they're asking, right now it's a player to player economy, and like if big time players don't have chips, it's like, where are we going to get chips from? Even at the 2-5 level, because they're raking so much, all the $5 chips are off the table, especially late at night. And it's like, just slows the game down where we're constantly making change, and people don't want to go get more red chips. It's a very frustrating and tough environment to play in right now.
And I think we had discussed before too, the other issue with this, I think we brought it up, was that like you don't get the occasional whale that might want to come blast off in a PLO game because he can't get chips, because they don't even sell chips. Here's the thing about this, just to refresh everybody. Not only is the $10 10% rake and all this other bullshit, and they were doing high hands promotions where they were taking like an extra $3 in my 2-5 game, but you can't buy chips, at least when I was there, that were more than $100 up at the poker cage. It's not even a poker cage. It's like, well, it is a cage, but it's next to the podium. So you can't, like, I was like, oh, can you give me like $1,000 chip or a $500 chip? No. But when you go and cash out, you can't cash out up there. Now, what I had been told, though, is that they had opened it to cash outs on the weekend nights sometimes. Is that not true?
I don't believe so.
Because I had heard that, so I'm not 100% sure about that. But for the most part, at least outside of maybe the top peak hours, maybe they did this and then they took it away, you have to walk downstairs to the main cage to cash out, or apparently you can walk across and up the stairs to like the high limit baccarat. It's kind of a little secret that I'm giving away to cash out. And I had sort of talked about how I was there one time, like almost on New Year's, and I had like 10 grand in my rack, and the crowd over there in Everett is not the same as the crowd that is at the Wynn in Las Vegas. There's a lot of riffraff. And it was, I was looking around and I'm like, this is fucking crazy. Like, I've got like this rack of like $10,000 in chips and like a line of 100 people, and it's not necessarily the best crowd. And I was like, there's got to be a better way to do this. And then I went back up and they're like, no, that's it. You have to cash out downstairs. But if they haven't changed it, it doesn't look like they're going to change it if they are going to move. Daryl keeps mentioning moving across the street, right? Because they're supposedly building a new building across the streat that they're going to move the poker room to.
Yeah, but I mean that seems to be 3 years away at the least.
Right.
And I mean, you know,
I feel for you as a regular player there. Like I said, I live in between Encore and Chasers, and I go up to Chasers because I love the double board bomb pots. The only problem, as somebody has said in the live chat, is that they don't play a lot of straight hold'em up there in New Hampshire anymore. I mean, it's really hard to even get a 2-5 game going. They have a lot of PLO, if you like PLO, and sometimes like the mixed games and stuff like that. But I mean, you do have Twin River, you do have MGM, and I guess you have home games. But whenever you have a situation in a market like this where there's just one operator, yeah, man, they can just get away with kind of like not treating the customers as well as they could. And you know, what is our respite is to try to be as nice about it as possible and sort of bring it out into the open. I think the drinks thing was a very easy thing to revert back. I don't know about this particular setup. Maybe they can change the intercoms. Maybe they can put up glass doors or something, some sort of soundproofing.
Bart, do you think that with the Maverick Gaming and Bally's partnership and talk of expanding the Twin River Bally's room, do you think that's going to change the landscape at all?
I don't even know. So is there talk that they're going to expand that?
Yeah, I mean, Eric Persson was on Nick Vertucci's show speaking about the partnership and how they're going to expand Bally's poker room. They're thinking about bringing some meetup games with some big names to to Rhode Island, and bringing live streaming there.
Well, but the thing is that, right, you have two populations like in suburban Boston, right? You have sort of north and south, right?
Yes.
It's kind of hard for somebody like me to go as a regular thing and travel down to Providence when I live in between Encore and Chasers on the North Shore. I mean, almost as hard. I mean, I could drive to Springfield, right? For people on the South Shore, yeah, but it's still like kind of geographically challenging. It's not like it's close. You know what I mean? Like, would you?
Yeah, I live in the city, so I get it.
I mean, would you drive like each, an hour to play your regular poker game? Although I did that.
I don't think so. And
although I did that when I lived in LA, even though I only lived 15 miles away from Commerce. At least one way it was an hour. So, yeah, man, I just, I feel for people that live in the city. And like I said, there are some other choices around, but they're sort of geographically challenging. I just wish they could really fix. Like I said, I haven't come across the whole noise thing that you were talking about, but I just really, it wouldn't seem like it would be that big of a deal to fix the whole cash out cage type issue where you could cash out up there and you could buy larger chips up there. I've never seen a poker room of this size operate like this, to the point, like I said, I told you last time, Daryl, I asked the guy, I'm like, is this an Encore property? That's what I asked them.
doesn't feel like it.
I like last summer, but
Yeah. I have one more thing.
Sure.
One more thing for me, Bart, is I will say that there are some awesome floor people who are there day to day, especially Martin. I'm not sure if you've ever had a chance to interact or meet him or talk to him, but he's very knowledgeable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he'll be running a poker room one day if he wants to. But there's some really good people doing some really good work on the floor there, and they're really good dealers. So I guess this really just comes from a level above.
Right.
And people really not, I guess, understanding how to operate a premium poker room.
And again, the difference, as I talked to the last guy that was running the room before he went and opened Resorts World, is apparently, again, like for some reason, I'm sorry, his name escapes me. He was in a position in sort of a corporate structure where he had influence, and now maybe these people that run the poker room don't. And, they can run the room as best as they can, and it's not their fault, and they can try to sort of pass along the feelings and the feedback of the players. But if they have no real influence, then the only influence is really not going there and giving them your business. But, poker is sort of an individualistic type of thing, and it's really hard to get any groups of poker players to do anything in unison, right?
Live poker is very healthy and the games are good. So it's very tough.
It's tough. But
we just got to keep making our voice heard. So we appreciate you giving us this.
Yeah, no problem, Daryl. No problem. And maybe you can give us an update like in another 6 months or something like that.
Will do.
All right. Thanks for the call. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right, guys. Well, 5:25. That means probably the Bills game's already started up. We did 5 calls here. Again, if you do want to get in on the show, you can click on the link in the description. It will give you instructions on how to pre-submit your hand. We're always looking for new callers. If you are a CLP subscriber, you will always get priority, and I read them all. And moderator extraordinaire Michael G passes along the best non-subscriber calls. This might be the very first call in show where every single hand was the same hand. That was kind of cool. But thank you guys very, very much for joining us. Thanks for keeping it real in the live chat, and we will see you all next week.